Hello everyone. Today's my lecture is on autonomic receptors. So autonomic neurotransmitters are acetylcholine and norepinephrine produce their effects on the organs by combining with the specific protein molecules that are known as receptors, and which are of the following types: cholinergic receptors. On the basis of the pharmacological properties, these are of two types: nicotinic receptors and muscarinic receptors. Nicotinic receptors. So, introduction. A substance called nicotine acts on a specific group of the receptors known as nicotinic receptors, and these receptors are located in or at autonomic ganglia of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, neuromuscular junction, and adrenal medulla. And this receptor produce excitation. Nicotinic receptors are activated by acetylcholine and nicotine. And the nicotinic receptors are ion-gated channel for sodium and potassium. Acetylcholine binds to alpha subunits of the nicotinic cholinergic receptors. Then blockage. So ganglion blockers, hexamethonium and trimethaphan, that block the nicotinic receptors for acetylcholine in the autonomic ganglia, but not at the neuromuscular junction. Muscarinic receptors. So poisonous substance from the toadstool called muscarine that acts on a specific group of the receptor that is known as muscarinic receptors, and muscarinic receptors are located in the heart, smooth muscles except vascular smooth muscle, and glands. Muscarinic receptors are divided into subtypes M1 to M5. M2 and M3 are main subtypes. M2 receptors are present mainly in the heart. M3 are located on smooth muscles and glands. These receptors are activated by acetylcholine and muscarine. Effect produced by their stimulation are inhibitory in the heart, means decreased heart rate and decreased conduction velocity in atrioventricular node. Excitatory in smooth muscle and glands. Increased gastrointestinal motility and increased secretion. Muscarinic receptors for acetylcholine are blocked by atropine. Then what is the mechanism of action of muscarinic receptors? In the heart at sinoatrial node, these receptors cause inhibition of adenyl cyclase, which leads to opening of the potassium channel, slowing of the rate of the spontaneous depolarization and decreased heart rate. In the smooth muscle and glands, these receptors act by formation of inositol triphosphate and increase in the intracellular calcium. Adrenergic receptors. On the basis of their pharmacological properties, adrenergic receptors are of two types: alpha adrenergic receptors that are again divided into two types, alpha 1 and alpha 2. Beta adrenergic receptors, which are of further three types: beta 1, beta 2 and beta 3. Alpha 1 receptors are located on the vascular smooth muscles of skin and splanchnic regions, gastrointestinal and bladder sphincters, and radial muscles of the iris. These receptors produce excitation, for example, contraction or constriction. Then catecholamine sensitivity. Alpha 1 receptors are equally sensitive to norepinephrine and epinephrine, but only norepinephrine is present in concentrations that are high enough to activate alpha-1 receptors. Then mechanism of action. These receptors act by formation of inositol 1,3,5-triphosphate and increase in the intracellular calcium level. Then alpha-2 receptors that are located in presynaptic nerve terminals, platelets, fat cells and walls of the gastrointestinal tract. And effect that produce inhibition, for example relaxation or dilatation. Then what is the mechanism of action of alpha-2 receptors? So alpha-2 receptor causes inhibition of adenyl cyclase and decrease in the cyclic adenosine monophosphate. Beta-1 receptors that are located in the sinoatrial node, atrioventricular node and ventricular muscles of heart. And these receptors produce excitation, increased heart rate, increased conduction velocity and increased contractility. Catecholamine sensitivity. Beta-1 receptors are sensitive to both norepinephrine and epinephrine and are more sensitive than alpha-1 receptors. Beta-1 receptors are located on vascular smooth muscles of skeletal muscle, bronchial smooth muscle and walls of the gastrointestinal tract and bladder. And these receptors produce relaxation. For example, dilatation of vascular smooth muscle, dilation of the bronchioles and relaxation of bladder wall. Sensitivity to epinephrine is more than the norepinephrine. And these are more sensitive to epinephrine than the alpha-1 receptors. For example, when the small amounts of the epinephrine are released from the adrenal medulla, vasodilatation, beta-2 effect occurs. When the large amounts of the epinephrine are released from the adrenal medulla, vasoconstriction through alpha-1 effect occurs. And mechanism of the action same as for beta-1 receptors. Beta-3 receptors are located on the adipose tissue and causes lipolysis. And beta-3 receptor cause increase in the cyclic AMP. So earlier we discussed that autonomic nervous system that consists of sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system and effector organs are visceral organs. Now it also consists of enteric nervous system, an enteric nervous system that lies entirely within the wall of the digestive tract. So what is the enteric nervous system? So enteric nervous system or third division of the autonomic nervous system is located within the wall of the digestive tract from esophagus to anus. And it is composed of two well organized neural plexus. The one is enteric plexus that is located between the longitudinal and circular layers of muscle and is involved in the control of the digestive tract motility. The submucosal plexus is located between the circular muscle and the luminal mucosa. It senses the environment of the lumen and regulates the gastrointestinal blood flow and epithelial cell function. Functions of the Auerbach's plexus. Major function of this plexus is to regulate the movements of the gastrointestinal tract. Some nerve fibers of this plexus accelerate the movements by secreting the excitatory neurotransmitter substance like acetylcholine, serotonin and substance P. Other fibers of this plexus inhibit the GI gastrointestinal motility by secreting the inhibitory neurotransmitters such as vasoactive intestinal polypeptide, neurotensin and enkephalin. Functions of Meissner plexus. It is the regulation of secretory functions of gastrointestinal tract. These nerve fibers cause constriction of the blood vessels of gastrointestinal tract. The enteric nervous system contains all the elements of the nervous system: sensory neuron, interneurons and motor neurons, and leading to it being referred to as mini brain. Enteric nervous system is also known as mini brain. Sensory neurons innervate the receptors in the mucosa that respond to mechanical, thermal, osmotic and chemical stimuli, and motor neurons that control the motility, secretion and absorption by acting on the smooth muscle and secretory cells, and interneurons that integrate the information from the sensory neurons feedback to enteric motor neurons. Parasympathetic and sympathetic nerves connect the central nervous system to enteric nervous system or directly to digestive tract. Although the enteric nervous system can function autonomously, normal digestive function that requires communication between the central nervous system and enteric nervous system. Then the higher control of the autonomic nervous system. So hypothalamus as the control center for the autonomic nervous system and neuroendocrine system. The hypothalamus has controlling influence on the autonomic nervous system and appears to integrate the autonomic and neuroendocrine system, so preserving the body homeostasis. Essentially, the hypothalamus should be regarded as a higher nervous center for the control of lower autonomic centers in the brainstem and spinal cord. Stimulation of the anterior region of the hypothalamus can influence the parasympathetic responses, whereas the stimulation of the posterior part of the hypothalamus that gives rise to sympathetic responses. In addition, lower brainstem centers such as vasopressor, vasodilator, cardioaccelerator, cardio-deaccelerator and respiratory centers that have been found in the reticular formation as a result of the experimental stimulation in the lower animals. It is believed that the various levels of the control are exerted as a result of interconnection of the different region by ascending and descending pathways. The neurons of the thoracolumbar outflow of the sympathetic part of the system and the neurons of the craniosacral outflow of the parasympathetic part of the system that receive their control through the descending tracts of reticular formation. Stimulation of the different parts of the cerebral cortex and the limbic system that produces autonomic effects, and it is assumed that this is brought about through the hypothalamus. Autonomic nervous system can be brought under voluntary control to some extent. This is seen, for example, in young individuals who may blush easily when embarrassed. As they mature or grown up, they are usually able to consciously train themselves to control this response. It should also be noted that the higher centers of the brain can abnormally influence the activities of the autonomic nervous system and induce the disease such as cardiac palpitation or arrhythmias and even myocardial infarction. This is the list of the reference book. Thank you very much.